Hello, this is chapter number 57, NSE4 Fortinet exam, about best practices and troubleshooting firewall policies. When configuring names for firewall objects, only specific characters are supported. Most firewall object name fields accept up to 35 characters. Supported characters in a firewall object name are numbers from 0 to 9, letters from A to Z, uppercase and lowercase, special characters, hyphen and underscore, spaces. You need to avoid using spaces in general. Some special characters are supported in passwords, comments, replacement messages, and so on. When configuring names, we need to include only supported characters. For example, training, then space, then LAN is not a valid name for an address object because it includes special characters that are not supported. Although spaces are supported in the names, as a best practice, avoid using spaces in names. Instead, use hyphen or underscore. Using spaces can cause issues when you will try to modify it on command line interface or when you're troubleshooting it. However, many special characters are supported in passwords, commands, replacement messages, and so on. So follow these naming rules and restrictions. Best practices. First, test policies in a maintenance window before deploying in production. Test policy for a few IP addresses, users, and so on. Always plan a maintenance window and create a test case for new IP addresses and users before implementing configuration changes into the production network. Any configuration changes made using the graphical user interface or command line interface take effect immediately and can interrupt service. So be careful when editing, disabling, or deleting firewall policies and objects. Changes are saved and activated immediately. It resets active sessions as well. Rule number 3. Create firewall policies to match as specifically as possible. For example, restrict firewall policies based on source, destination, and service. Use proper subnetting for address object. As best practice, try to configure firewall policies as specifically as possible. This helps to restrict access to only those resources. For example, use correct subnets when configuring address objects. Rule number 4. Analyze and enable appropriate settings on a per policy basis, such as security profiles and logging settings. Security profiles help to provide appropriate security for a network. Proper logging configuration can also help you to analyze, diagnose, and resolve common network issues. Adjusting policy order. Remember, first matching rule always applies, arranging your policy the way that there is a correct position of each rule is very important. It affects which traffic is blocked and what traffic is allowed. In section of the applicable interface pair, FortiGate looks for a matching policy, beginning at the top. So we should put more specific policies at the top. Otherwise, more general policies will match the traffic first, and more granular policies will never be applied. For example, if we are moving block_FTP policy, which is ID2, that matches only FTP traffic, to a position above more general full_access, which is accept everything from everywhere policy, and if we do it, otherwise FortiGate would always apply first matching policy in the applicable interface pairs full_access, because full_access includes everything everywhere, and the second rule is block FTP policy, so it will never reach block_FTP policy. When moving the policies across the policy list, policy IDs always remain unchanged. And note that FortiGate assigns the next highest available ID number as policies are created. Also note that the policy IDs are identifiers and are not displayed by default on the policy list in the graphical user interface. But we can add a policy ID column using Configure Table Settings icon. Combining firewall policies. Check the settings before combining firewall policies. Source and destination interfaces, source and destination IP addresses, services, schedules, security profiles, logging, network address translation rules. In order to optimize and consolidate firewall policies, always check all configured settings. In this example, the two firewall policies have differences in terms of services, security profiles, and logging settings. And we can consolidate these two firewall policies by combining services and choosing appropriate logging settings. If we select security events, which is UTM, Unified Threat Management, for logging settings, traffic logs will not be generated for all _ICMP traffic. Note that the all _ICMP service is not subject to web filter and antivirus scans. And it means that applying these security profiles to ICMP traffic will result in the traffic passing through without being inspected. Policy lookup, graphical user interface. Policy lookup, identify matching policy without real traffic. It does not generate any packets. You can find a matching firewall policy based on the policy lookup input criteria. Policy lookup creates a packet flow over FortiGate without real traffic. From this policy lookup can extract a policy ID from the flow trace and highlight on the graphical user interface policy configuration page. Depending on the protocol, we might select, for example, TCP, UDP, IP, ICMP, and so on. We need to define other input criteria. For example, when we select TCP, Transport Control Protocol, as a protocol, we need to define the source address, source port, which is optional, destination port, and destination address, destination IP or FQDN, fully qualified domain name. When we select ICMP as the protocol, we need to define the ICMP type or code, source address, and destination address. When FortiGate is performing policy lookup, it performs a series of checks on ingress, stateful inspection, and egress on the matching firewall policy from top to bottom before providing results for the matching policy. Note that if the firewall policy status is set to disable, the policy lookup skips the disabled policy and checks for the next matching policy in the list. If you studied CCNA, Cisco Certified Network Associate, when you study everything about access control lists, ACLs, everything what you studied there will be applicable to this policy lookup and this policy order. That knowledge from that area is applicable to this area. And when FortiGate is in transparent mode, it does not support the policy lookup function. Policy lookup example. Based on the input criteria after checking search, the trace result is selected and highlighted on the firewall policy page. Why didn't policy ID number 1 or ID number 2 match the input criteria? Because policy ID number 1 status is set to disable. Policy lookup skips the disabled policy. For firewall policy ID number 2, it doesn't match the destination port specified in the policy lookup matching criteria. Knowledge checks. Which of the following name formats is correct when configuring a name for a firewall address object? good_training or good_training. And the right answer is good_training. What is the purpose of the lookup policy feature on the FortiGate? Option 1, to find the matching policy based on input criteria or to block traffic based on input criteria. And the correct answer is to find the matching policy based on input criteria. Thank you. See you in the next chapter. Bye.